who mostly worked in rural areas. I didn't know that she knew that what eminently qualified me to give this keynote speech was that I was born in my grandmother's house on a farm, in her house, because she was a partera. She was a midwife. Her hands were the first to touch my little body. She brought me into this world. She was an amazing woman. And my other grandmother, who was my two grandmothers were really close friends, was also in the room. And when I was born, they hadn't had a name for me. And I'm thinking, like, my mom was kind of shirking her responsibility. She didn't have a name for me. But when her mother-in-law said, when I was born, said, "Ay, mira, se parece a mi Benjamin," which was her son, Benjamin, who died. My uncle, whom I never met, died as an infant when he was 1 year old. And so they named me after him. And my father, of course, and my uncle, whom I named after, who's a baby when he died, is buried in Fort Davis, Texas, where my father's from. I come from a long line of farmers and people who lived in rural communities. My father was born and raised in Fort Davis. My grandfather and my grandmother worked on a ranch in that area. My family on my grandmother's side were a long line of New Mexico farmers. When I grew up on a farm, it was, so much of it was a kind of an underground society. It was a very unintegrated society. I grew up in farm country where everybody was mostly Mexican American and mostly spoke Spanish at home. And we went to San Albino Church in Mesilla, and there was a priest there who was Espanol. He was a Spaniard, Father Potzer. He'd been there forever. He just was there forever. So everything in that church was done in Spanish. So it wasn't like we thought we lived in America. It was really odd for me when I entered school, because I felt that I spoke a secret language. I spoke Spanish, and it was odd to me that when people only spoke, I didn't speak very much English. My English was terrible. I spoke a few words. I was the fourth of 7 children. We were all a year apart. So it was incredible. My parents didn't have any hobbies. So it was incredible to me. I was really raised as much by my parents as my brothers and sisters. And I always felt that not only as almost a kind of a secret society, but we ourselves were secrets. It was like we were not a part of the dominant culture. The thing about secrets is that they're meant to be kept, which is to say they are meant to silence you. You don't break the silence. You go along with the norms of society. Unfortunately, in the culture that I grew up in, I went to school in Mesilla Park School in what was essentially a segregated school. There was a Mexican first grade and a gringo first grade. It was a small school. There was only 2 classes in each one. And then in 2nd grade, there was a Mexican first grade, 2nd grade, and a gringo 2nd grade. And so it went up to 6th grade. Except for they had started in that era. I entered school in 1960. In that era, they started this thing called tracking. They tracked students. And so when I went into 4th grade, they switched some of the gringos in with the Mexicans because they weren't considered so smart. And they moved some of the Mexicans in with the gringos because we were considered smart. And I was very much confused by this. See, the secrets being kept was that this is the way things are done, this is the way we do things, and we keep you separate. And we don't talk about racism. you come to school to get an education, and we will separate you. We won't talk about it. But you start to notice, and you're confused because people don't tell you what's going on. There are many secrets that we keep on the border. Not all of those secrets we keep are bad. I mean, one of the secrets we keep is that this border community is incredible. You know, people are kind of sometimes, pardon my language, but it pisses me off when they go, wow, El Paso's a great town. It's like, partially because they have such low expectations of us. I mean, it's true. And they have this image of the border. And it's, we're all, they really, I'm an off and on smoker. And then when I do smoke and I'm out of town, I kind of like it because you go outside, because it's not cool to smoke. So you go outside and you're out there in the cold. And I was in Boston, and this was not many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And this guy asked me, he's out there. He's from Boston, but they're staying there because they live in the suburbs. And there's a hockey game, so they're staying at the hotel too, but they're not really out-of-towners. And he says to me, El Paso. He says, how is it there? And I'm thinking, I want to know what this guy's really asking. And I said, how is it there? Oh, what do you mean by that? He says, with all the illegals there, how is it? And I said, I don't really know. Because people who come into the country illegal, who are actually undocumented, I don't call them that, but who come in, they only pass through here. They actually come to Boston, so how is it? You see, we keep, the people are so suspicious of the border and think and have such low expectations of the communities on the border, both rural and urban, is really about cultural and institutional racism. They don't consider us to be equal to them. You see, because they live in cultural capitals, we don't. I have news for you. Let me break this secret. El Paso Juarez is a huge cultural center. And it's a beautiful place. We have artists, we have musicians, Juarez is at the edge of their country, It's at the very edge of the country. And El Paso is at the very edge of the country. And both cities reside very far away from the centers of government. And so they don't pay any attention to us, but we pay attention to each other. Another secret that people don't like to talk about is the economics of the border. Without Juarez, El Paso would die and wither. We need the people of Juarez for our economy, and we don't talk about that. Because everybody's supposed to need us. But it's mutual. The other secret of the border that we don't like to talk about is that on borders of countries always exist as safety valves. If you don't have those safety valves, those countries will explode. We need, so in a sense, Juarez serves in a very kind of terrible way as an economic safety valve for both the United States and Canada. It's called cheap labor. And that's an economic safety valve which we use and abuse. And the government of Mexico is complicit. Poverty doesn't exist in a vacuum, it's created. We create poverty, and we can do something about it. But it's economics. We all feel paralyzed. And I think one of the great things about being a writer is that I break silence. It's my job to bear witness. It's my job to tell stories. It's my job to find the words to talk about the fact that the border isn't just a metaphor. It's a material reality, and real people live here. We breathe the air here. We suffer here. We work here. We die here. We love here. We're as real as anybody else. And I think that that's my job, to make sure that people know that we're here. And it's a great privilege. You know, I think it's a great privilege to know and understand words. Words become so invisible to us. The very words that we use are almost sometimes secrets to us because we're so unaware of it. We're so used to using them, but they're invisible to us. But when we become writers and we're trying to write a sentence, and we're trying to put a story together or write a poem, then words have to be visible to us. And we have to know the meanings of words that we use every day. And yet those words have a context. And to understand those words is not just to look them up in a dictionary, it is in the living. I'll give you two examples of two words that are in my vocabulary that are very important to me, that I learned in the living. When I was studying to be a priest, I lived in Belgium, and I was studying there theology and philosophy for 4 years at the University of Louvain in Belgium. And one summer, there was a group of priests in Germany that wanted to recruit people that would be missionaries. And so I was kind of asked if I wanted to go spend a summer in Tanzania. And I'm going like, oh yeah, I want to go to Tanzania. And they were trying to come and see it, wouldn't you like to be a missionary kind of thing. So I spent a summer in Tanzania. And it was incredible. I lived at the Fountain Mount in a village at the time. You know, Dar es Salaam itself was a village at the time. It wasn't a Western city as we know it. It isn't the city that it is today. So I lived in Moshi, which is the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro, all summer long. And it was an incredible experience. And I got to go on safari to the Serengeti, and I was amazed by the beauty of Africa. A landscape that was so foreign to me that I did not compare it to anything I had ever known or seen, nor had I need to compare it to. But one time we went into the Usambara Mountains, and there is some priests from Germany, and their order, I mean, this is true. You can't make this stuff up. Their order was the White Fathers. And then I'm thinking, I never heard of that order, and I thought, you're kidding, right? You're being ironic. But they weren't. And so they had this coffee plantation on top of this mountain in the Usambara Mountains, and we went on safari from Moshi, and it took us about a day to get there. And when we reached the top of the mountain where the plantation was that were run by the White Fathers, what did I see? A German village. It completely erased the African landscape, and they transplanted a German village. And on that very moment, I understood the meaning of the word colonialism. And I understand that word in a way that no dictionary could ever explain it to me. Another word I learned when I was in Europe. One summer, I went with a group of friends over spring break for 2 weeks to Spain. And Franco hadn't been dead for all that long back then. This was in 1970, no, this was 1982 or 3. I think Franco hadn't been dead for all that long, and certainly there was a long transition to democracy. So people were talking about politics everywhere. I mean, they just like in bars everywhere, they were just like, and graffiti was sprouting like daisies in spring, and they were all, interestingly enough, about women's rights. The graffiti, which I really liked. I thought that was cool. And so, but I went right north of Madrid. There is a place called El Valle de los Caídos, and I can't think of the name of the cathedral that was built there. And then it's a mountainous area right north of Madrid, like Ruidoso and stuff. And it's really beautiful. And Franco had built, after he defeated the Republican Army, into the mountain, a cathedral, a basilica. And so we went there. And then, of course, you know that who built that basilica was the defeated Republican Army, and they built that church as slave labor, and thousands were killed building that church. And you walk into this long hallway, and then you walk into the basilica finally. And then Franco used to be buried there, but they moved his body. At the time, Franco was buried at the foot of the altar. And so the dome, you see, he has a fresco. And on one side, Franco is leading an army of angels. And on the other side, in chariots. And then on the other side, all of his enemies are depicted as devils. And to know the history of that, and Franco presents himself as an angel. When he built a basilica on slave labor where thousands died, this is not a holy place. And I was horrified because I was in seminary studying to be a Catholic priest, and a basilica is a designation. A basilica doesn't have to be a big church. Messia is designated, San Albino is a designated basilica. It's designated by Rome as a holy place of worship. It doesn't mean cathedral. And as soon as that was built, the Catholic Church designated it as a basilica, a special holy place of worship. I was horrified by those erasures, and erasures are a kind of silence. You learn the meaning of words and what they mean in the living. And when you understand a word, it becomes a part of your body, a part of your tongue, and some of those words can, in fact, embitter the heart. I am a writer and a poet by desire and by discipline. It is an art form, but it is also a moment. It is also a supremely political act. It cannot help but be such. We all need to bear witness. We are not just people who watch our times as people who just stand by and as some kind of cultural anthropologist who studies what's going on. We are participants. I don't really write about our times. I am a man of my times. And I must speak. And I have learned to speak about my place in the world. There are things that happen in this world that are not fair, that are supremely unjust. And we built those structures that are supremely unjust, and we can unbuild them. I realize that we feel powerless, but all of you in this room are not powerless. I've had social workers in my life. I've had counselors in my life. I've needed them. There's a lot of violence that happens in our communities, but we don't call it violence. That is also an erasure. Poverty is a great violence. From poverty, we create people who feel not only disenfranchised, but subhuman. You know, we have a huge addiction problem in this country, for example. It shouldn't surprise you that that affects rural communities as well as urban. It just doesn't happen in the cities, it's all over urban communities. Alcoholism, all kinds of addiction. We are the biggest drug and alcohol consuming country in the world. And yet we continue to glamorize that. We glamorize, I don't have anything against alcohol, but when we continually glamorize it in such a way that it becomes a virtue, then I think we have a problem. I also think that we have a problem in the way that we name addiction. Because often we do call it alcohol or drug abuse. And it is abuse, but it is not that. It is addiction. It is addiction, and addiction is a disease. And we don't deal with the disease, but I think a lot of social workers do. People who suffer from addiction and alcoholism need a lot of self-compassion. If they don't learn how to love the self, they're not going to recover, pure and simple. I really believe that as a writer, I stand with my community as a spokesperson, but also as a citizen. I am first a citizen and secondly a poet and writer. And I think that we must remember when we sometimes are enraged by things that happen in our culture, that anger fundamentally comes from compassion and care. Anger means that we are so in love with the world that we live in, that we are outraged by some of the behaviors in it and the structures in it that create inequality and make people believe that they are less than equal. I have been very privileged in my life because I understand that I have a voice and I know how to use it. But with that comes a great responsibility. I am responsible. I have a social contract to the people in my community and to my readers. I have a lot of readers, and you know what? I'm very lucky, and I'd like to think I've earned them. And I'd like to think I've earned them honestly. I have worked very, very hard. And so do you. Work is a beautiful word. I am in love with that word. Sometimes I wish my students were too. But really, I mean, I think of when I write, and someone once told me, you know, Mr. Saenz, one of my students who made it he's like, he decided he was going to read all my books. You know, this was after he had been in my class, so he came up to me, Mr. Saenz, did you know that all of your novels were set on the border? And I just smiled. I said, well, I hadn't noticed that. And I have been criticized, frankly, for that by, not here, but in reviews. I never noticed that anybody ever criticized, William Faulkner for only writing about the South. This is my place, baby. These are my people. This is who I write about. This is what I care about. I think it's my job, when I write, to make sure that my readers fall in love with us. Because I'm in love with us. I love this place. I was born right outside of Messiah. And I grew up my dad used to buy groceries in Juarez. I got all my haircuts growing up in Juarez. Always used to grow. I didn't know there were barbers. I thought when I was a little kid, well, they must not have barbers in the United States. Because, we had to get our haircut in Juarez. So, I grew up crossing the border. And I thought it was great. I thought the farm was so boring. And then you go to Juarez and everybody's speaking Spanish and people like, oh, the streets are full. And I thought, wow, and I like it. And it was so alive, and incredible to me. I may have been born on and really, I did grow up picking onions and cotton. I picked onions when I was 14, and I was thinking to myself, I was a smart kid, I thought, well, isn't there such a thing as child labor law? I guess nobody cared. And I'm picking cotton and lettuce and all this stuff, right? And I remember once just really being really angry in the back of the pickup, going home, sunburned, my back aching. I'm 15 years old, and I just there's a stench of onion all over me, and I said to myself, you know what? When I grow up, I'm definitely going to college, because this is not for me, and I left, and I was gone for a long time, and then I came back. Then I left again, and then I got my master's in creative writing here at UTEP, and then I got a scholarship after I left the priesthood, and then I got a fellowship at the University of Iowa. And I hated Iowa because this was 1986, and there was very few Latinos on campus, and I was one of the very few Latinos on campus, and everybody would go up to me and say, did you know that you look like Geraldo Rivera? Who is not exactly my favorite person. And I'm thinking, well, they must be the only Latino that they've ever seen, so yeah. And I couldn't take it. I thought, I did not know that that I had to go and be a trailblazer. This is not what I set out to do. I said, yeah, you know what? When I grow up, I'm going to be a Latino trailblazer. That's what I'm going to be. And sometimes it enrages me. It enrages me that I've had to be, that in my, especially when I began my career here at UTEP, that I had to be an academic, advocate. That enraged me. I shouldn't have to be doing this. And I still, at the height, I have a lot of friends, I used to have a lot of friends on Juarez, and certainly know a lot of, and I had a professor who there's a couple of professors that used to live in Juarez and teach here. And it's a community that I love, and I write about often in my writing. And I would get, these phone calls from newspaper reporters at the height of the violence. They asked me all these questions, and I felt like a native informant, and I resented it. Get your ass down here. Don't call me from the BBC from London. Get over here. And don't just stay 3 days, stay a month. Do a real story. And that enraged me, and it still enrages me because they still do it. I don't appreciate it because I think it's disrespectful to the people who live here. Because you're still writing about an idea about us, and we are not just an idea. We are a lovely people who have fought long and hard. And I will always say that I am very proud to be the son of a Mexican-American people who have never properly been thanked for making this country great. I believe that one of the things about being a writer that's really a great privilege is that I try to bring out the best in people, not the worst in them. I believe that the arts, literature, can humanize us, can remind us that we belong to each other, can break our silences, can break our secrets, and reveal ourselves to each other. We can't remain hidden and separate from each other any longer. I'm sorry that I live in a world that has devolved in the uncivil and uncivilized political discourse of our times. But I refuse to participate in that kind of discourse, and mercifully, I don't have to. I believe that language, the spoken word and the written word, is meant to communicate, to bring people together. I believe that all of us together can truly build a better world. But we have to build bridges, and part of that means speaking. Not just speaking our own truth, but listening to other people's truths, which is incredibly important. To learn to listen. You know, often I'm in a room and I think sometimes we don't listen to each other in committees and in classrooms. We just wait our turn, but we're not listening. The beauty about, I know one of the things I love about reading, which I love to read, you know, writers do love to read, is that I give myself over to the book and I let it speak to me. I don't analyze it, I don't critique it, I don't say, I'm a writer, I can write a better sentence than you, ha ha. I don't say those things. I just give myself over to the book, and the book owns me, and I read it, and I learn something. Because the book doesn't have to be about me. It should maybe be about something that isn't me, so I can learn something. I grew up here and in Las Cruces. You know how I learned about African American culture? Reading James Baldwin, who still remains one of my favorite writers. You know, you read a book, a novel, by a woman, you may learn something about what it's like to be a woman. You know, men should learn something from that. You know, I am very embarrassed often about the behavior of my own gender. That we don't understand male privilege. It's not an attack on me personally. But the fact remains that it is still a male-dominated culture. And if you're male, you benefit from that. That doesn't happen to be my fault. I didn't personally construct the culture. But I need to acknowledge that. And, you know, and it's difficult, I think, you know. By the way, I'm a gay man. And so I always make a joke about men. I say, the only problem with being gay is you have to date men. And women often, they laugh harder at the joke than men do. And there is a reason for that. There has to be a sense of equality in the way that we do things. All of us are human beings. We're not cliches. You know, we're not like, what does it mean to be a Native American anyway? Oh, are they all alike? They're not. They're people, just like we're people. And that is what is great about being a writer. because I have to create characters that feel real. They have to feel, people really believe, I mean, I have a lot of people, kids, especially kids, they kind of believe that my last two characters in my book, they believe that they're real. You know, I love Ari and Dante, you know, they're kids, they're fans, they're high school kids, they're dorks, they're beautiful. And I love, they're like so into them because to them, those two young men are real. That's what I get to do. That's a beautiful thing. I get to help remind other people that the people of the border are real, because we are. We really are. It is our job to speak. It is our job to bear witness. It is our job to break all the silences that have been imposed on us. The AIDS activists were right. Silence does equal death. Thank you very much.